You know, if you really want to future-proof your career, you can probably just toss out those management textbooks. Turns out, the best advice comes from about 3.5 billion years of trial and error. So, let's dig in and see what evolution can teach us about actually surviving and even thriving in corporate life.
We've all heard it, right? The corporate jungle. It's the phrase we use for everything from tough negotiations to just trying to figure out office politics. But what if we stopped using it as just a metaphor? What if we actually took it literally?
Because, if we're going to call it a jungle, we should probably understand the real laws that govern one. And it turns out, they're probably not what you think they are. In fact, they might just hold the keys to navigating your entire career. All right, lesson 1. This one gets right to the heart of the biggest misconception we have about the jungle. It's not about being the biggest or the loudest person in the room. Nope. It's about something way more subtle and a whole lot more powerful.
This is the absolute core truth, and it's a line from Darwin that everybody gets wrong. It was never survival of the strongest. It's survival of the most responsive to change. The creatures that make it are the ones that adapt. And think about it. In a changing world, what used to be your greatest strength can very quickly become your biggest liability.
And this brings a classic business story to life perfectly. You had Blockbuster, right? They were the dinosaur. Massive, dominant, and they needed huge amounts of resources just to operate. But man, were they slow to change. And then you have Netflix, the small mammal. They were energy efficient, nimble, and they could pivot in a heartbeat when that meteor of high-speed internet finally hit. It just proves the point. Adaptability beats raw power every single time.
Have you ever had that feeling? Like you're learning new skills, you're working your tail off, but it just feels like you're treading water, not really getting anywhere. Well, guess what? There's an evolutionary principle that explains that exact feeling. It's called the Red Queen hypothesis. It's named after a character from Through the Looking Glass who says, in her world, you have to run as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. Sound familiar? It's exactly the same in our careers. The market, the technology, it's all constantly evolving around us. So learning new skills isn't just about getting ahead anymore. It's a biological necessity just to stay in the game.
So lesson 2. This one builds right on that idea of constantly adapting. It's all about your professional diet, your skill set.
Okay, this might sound a little harsh, but it's a critical truth from biology. See, in a stable environment, being a specialist is a fantastic strategy. But when the landscape shifts, when the whole game changes, that one narrow thing you do can just vanish, almost overnight. Just think about it. The koala eats only eucalyptus leaves. That's it. If a disease wipes out those trees, that koala is in serious trouble. But an omnivore, like a fox or a raccoon, they have options. This is a perfect metaphor for our skills. So you gotta ask yourself, which one are you?
So what's the solution to this specialist dilemma? It's becoming what people call a T-shaped professional. You still have that deep expertise in one core area. That's the vertical bar of the T. But then you also build out this broad, functional knowledge across a bunch of other areas. That's the horizontal bar. This is basically the blueprint for the modern professional omnivore.
So what does this actually look like day to day? Well, an evolutionary omnivore doesn't just say, I'm a Java developer. They see themselves as a problem solver who uses Java as one of their tools. As you can see, they can speak the language of the product team. They get what sales needs, and they know how to work with everybody. This lets them find food, or, add value, all over the organization.
Okay, so you're adaptable. You've got a diverse skill set. But there's a third, and maybe even more powerful, evolutionary strategy, and this one kind of flips the whole idea of cutthroat competition on its head.
We always think of nature as being red in tooth and claw, right? Pure competition. But that's really only half the story. Cooperation is one of the biggest drivers of evolutionary progress. The lone wolf is mostly a myth. It's the pack that survives the winter.
So how do you build your own corporate pack? Well, it's a pretty deliberate process. First, you identify allies in other departments. Then, you focus on creating real win-win relationships where you're both helping each other out. And finally, you have to actively maintain and reinforce that network. This isn't just schmoozing or office politics. It's a seriously sophisticated survival strategy.
So, after all this, what's the big takeaway? I think the most empowering lesson from 3.5 billion years of life on Earth is that you are not just a passive victim of your environment. You can actually direct your own evolution.
Let's pull it all together here. Just think of your career like it's a living thing. To keep it healthy, you've got to feed it diverse nutrients.
New skills. It needs a healthy ecosystem to live in, a good company culture. And it needs the willingness to shed old skins. Those habits that just don't serve you anymore.
That wave of change, it's always coming. Could be a market disruption, could be new tech, a reorg at work, whatever. You've got a choice. You can just stand there and let it crash over you like a forced mutation, or you can learn to surf. You really don't have to wait for change to happen to you.
And that's your call to action. Be the directed mutator. Take control. Proactively adapt your skills, build your pack, and diversify your professional diet. Start guiding your own evolution. Don't just survive the corporate jungle. Become one of its most adaptable and resilient life forms.